Talking about this French Revolution and how many Federalists in the United States viewed it. How did Federalists view?
They didn't like it.
Right. Why didn't they like it?
Because we were allies with them, so they were expected to fight alongside them, and they believed that we couldn't.
That's excellent. That was going to be my next question. So, but the Federalists themselves, they were the wealthier, aristocratic people of America, and they kind of were fearful of the Jeffersonian masses, like the lower classes of people, whom would be the ones that would be the most likely to create a mob. So, yeah, but Thomas Jefferson, he's not like going to grab a pitchfork and just start, wailing away on somebody. That's not his style. He's more sober-minded than like a mob mentality. So, but he also, Thomas Jefferson's he's not just going to roll over. This is a guy that is quoted as saying things like, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." So he's no stranger, or he's definitely not fearful of violence in order to preserve freedom and liberty. Okay? So when it comes to France itself, France is in the throes of a coup. You guys know what a coup is? COOP. Yeah, like a overthrowing of a government, and they were kind of weak and wobbly, and they did need some assistance. Fortunately for the French, they had an alliance on the books. What was that alliance, like Taryn was telling us? What was it called? You guys remember? It was called the Franco-American Alliance. When was it made? 1778. We'd only declared our independence 2 years earlier. It was still on the books. And by the terms of its own, by its own terms, it was never to expire. America and France were to be forever allies. So it was on the books, still, even during the presidency of George Washington. And basically what it says is it binds both nations to help each other against foes, present and future. That's how it's written, foes. You know what foe means? Are you friend or foe? Yeah. Well, who is the foe that is threatening France? Who's always the foe that's threatening France? England. England sees France in the midst of a revolution. They see an opportunity. Not necessarily to move in on France, but to move in on French possessions, French colonies. They say, hey, France is having trouble of their own in their own country. We can move in on their colonies, and it works out well for us. Well, France, regardless of who's in power, they don't want to lose control of their colonies. And in America, we have two sides. We have the formation of political parties. One side favors which country? The Federalists favor which country? Britain or England. And then the Jeffersonian Democrats or Democratic Republicans, they favor France. So once again, President Washington is stuck in the middle with Alexander Hamilton screaming in one ear, we need to help the British. And then Thomas Jefferson screaming in the other ear, hey, we have this alliance with the French. Remember, they saved our butts. We wouldn't even be here if it weren't for them.
Why would we help the British though if we literally just beat them?
Alexander Hamilton believes that the British Empire and the United States are linked by common heritage, religion, language, and commerce, and so therefore we should be linked together in the future. Not as mother country and colony, but as equals. And he's kind of right. Commerce is important. So, George Washington is not swayed by either person, neither Hamilton or Jefferson. So if he's not swayed by either person, what does he choose to do?
Remain neutral.
Remain neutral. It's called neutrality. And he makes a proclamation. Washington makes a proclamation of neutrality. He believes that a war with either side would be very costly to the United States and should be avoided.
What year did he make that?
The 1793. 1793. And he's not wrong. You know, the United States is weak, economically wobbly, politically disunited, not getting along very well. But Washington, for his part, is laying solid foundations for the future. And Washington wisely surmised or reasoned that if America could avoid Europe in general for a generation or so, we would be populous enough, have enough people, and have enough might to assert our own strength against them. So he really just comes, it's a strategy of delay. Just wait, trying to wait it out. Now, if you're England or France, do you want America to just wait it out? You want to force America's hand to choose a side, one way or the other. So when Washington boldly issues this neutrality proclamation in 1793, just shortly after England and France declared war on each other again, it not only proclaims our government's official neutrality, but also warns the average American citizen to be neutral as well. Because that's what Washington believes our country needs. Citizens always listen to what the president says, right?
No.
Rarely ever, honestly. People in America really don't like to be told what to do at all. Okay? And I'm sure you've seen firsthand examples of that. So, pro-French Jeffersonians, how do they feel about this neutrality proclamation by Washington?
I think we should help France.
Like, what the heck, George? You just forgetting about all that aid they gave us during the American Revolution? There wouldn't be an America if we didn't have this alliance. Shame on you, George. Shame. Debate intensified over what to do when a representative of the French Republic arrives in America, and his name is Edmond Genet. We refer to him now as Citizen Genet, but his name was Edmond Genet.
Why do we call him Citizen?
I'm going to tell you. That's an excellent question. Edmond Genet arrives in America at the port of Charleston in South Carolina. And Citizen Edmond Genet comes to America to try to find citizens, Americans, who are willing to acknowledge the existence of the Franco-American alliance and would be willing to come and fight for the French. So he's enlisting Americans to fight for France, trying to take advantage of the Franco-American alliance. How do you believe he was received? Where does he arrive? Where is he at, first of all? He's in the South. He's in South Carolina. Now, in the South, are they more Jeffersonian Democrats or are they more Federalist?
Jefferson.
Much more Jeffersonian, because it's a lot of farmers, all right? So how do you think Genet was received?
They took him up on it, I guess.
Enthusiastically. He had an enthusiastic reception by the Jeffersonian Republicans. And Genet comes to believe that Washington's neutrality proclamation is very undemocratic. It is not reflecting the wishes of the American people. Because everywhere he goes, it seems like people having parades and welcoming him into their homes and feeding him. And they're happy to see him and love the French. And so he believes that the people of America want to declare war on England and support the French. And he basically tells President Washington that in person. Okay, so France. This is the same time, 1790s, 93. So all the while this is going on, he's still going. Genet's still traveling about, raising up sentiment to support the French throughout the South, predominantly, until ultimately it becomes dangerous for him to go home. Too dangerous for him to go home. So he applies for citizenship of the United States and attains it. Okay, so back to this neutrality proclamation. It is clear that the neutrality proclamation is self-interested. It's not about, hey, we owe you allegiance, France, for helping us out, or hey, England, yeah, we want to have trade and you can make us a bunch of money, but it's all about our own self-interest, trying to protect ourselves. Technically, the Americans were not obligated because France never officially called upon us to honor it. Citizen Genet, yeah, he was a guy from France that wanted us to honor it, but the leadership of France never said, hey, America, you better get over here to honor this agreement. They never technically called upon us to do that. So America was much more useful to France as a reliable neutral than kind of being a wild card. Like if France knew, okay, America's just kind of staying out of it, they don't have to consider what would happen if America entered the conflict on the side of the British. So it was better to have a known than an unknown. Does that make sense? Okay. So President Washington's really, it was an unpopular decision, extremely unpopular, because the entire nation is polarized. You got Federalists and you got Democratic Republicans, and they both want a decision made. And George Washington doesn't appease either one of them. We're staying right in the middle, because one side wanted British support, one side wanted French, and Washington, boom, right in the middle. George Washington was extremely unpopular as president. One of the most unpopular presidents of all time. I mean, he made everybody mad. But what he did was fantastic. If America had entered war against either of these nations, we may not be America anymore. Okay? So it was a really, really great decision made by Washington.
Anyone for the bathroom?
Pardon?
Did you need someone for the bathroom?
I didn't call.
You didn't call?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I didn't.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for checking, though. Okay. All the while, England is still causing us problems. Still causing us problems. It's like England wants us to fight, and they're doing everything that they can to make us upset. British agents are openly selling guns and liquor to Native Americans and instigating those Native Americans into fighting. Fighting who?
Us.
Settlers. And as a result of this, a lot of real battles take place between American settlers and Native Americans in the new territory that we received from England. out of the Treaty of Paris. Do you remember the Treaty of Paris, all that land we got? Lots of fighting's taking place there against the United Americans versus Native American Indian tribes, like one's called the Miami. You think Miami, you think Florida, right? But there's also a Miami in Ohio. Miami of Ohio. Okay. So several battles take place. One's like called the Battle of Fallen Timbers, where General Matt Anthony Wayne routed the Miamis there and treated the Native Americans very harshly. Ultimately, all this conflict and violence leads to a treaty. What's a treaty? What is a treaty? Definition.
A peace paper?
Between who?
People are fighting?
Different countries.
Usually it's two different countries, okay? So you're absolutely right. It's just an agreement between two countries. Well, here's a treaty that occurs. It's called the Treaty of Greenville. And it's a treaty between the United States of America and Native American tribes. The Treaty of Greenville was signed in August of 1795. Why are we talking about a treaty between America and Native Americans?
We didn't honor it.
Typically, whenever a treaty between the United States happens between us and Native Americans, it's usually not honored by America. All right, so here's what it does. The Confederacy of Native Americans is going to give up they don't really have land claims because they don't believe in land ownership, really. But it's God's land, the Great Spirit's land for all of us to share and benefit from. But according to the Treaty of Greenville, most of present-day Indiana and Ohio is going to be abandoned by the Native Americans. Now, this is an agreement, so the Native Americans are giving up something significant. Indiana and Ohio. What do they get in return?
I don't know. Left the land?
They get $20,000 in a lump sum and an annual payment of $9,000. Annual payments are called annuities. They are also granted access to the land for hunting. For living on? No, for hunting. They have the right to hunt the lands which they ceded, which they gave away. For $20,000 up front and an annuity of about $9,000. And this treaty lasts forever, right? Doesn't last too long. Because in order to do this, they have to live kind of close. Places like Michigan, Illinois.
Are the French still in Michigan?
At this time? No. Remember, the French were removed
Oh, yeah.
during the French and Indian War. There may be occasional, a French family or a French people, but as far as the French government is concerned, they are not in North America as a result of the French and Indian War. Okay? I told you guys you could work on your outlines too, didn't I? Okay. I will stop it there. Next time we'll do the end of Washington's presidency, the beginning of John Adams' presidency, and this thing called Jay's Treaty. Jay's Treaty.